The reality is that progress is based on solving problems we don't know the answer to now. And the entire history of human history was that we found things we hadn't figured out and we figured out how to do them. What I do understand is the following. If I know something really well, I can tweak it and make it better. If I don't know anything about something, I have the chance to create a breakthrough because I approach it with open eyes and like a fresh perspective. I simply don't know.
Hey everyone, I'm Steve Loflin and welcome back to ScholarScoop. A number of years ago, I heard today's guest say something that completely reframed the way I think about genius. He suggested that every one of us has a form of genius inside of us. And not only that, but that we are surrounded by geniuses every single day. That idea really stuck with me. So today, I'm thrilled to be talking with award-winning author, consultant, and sought-after speaker, Alan Gregerman. If you've read his award-winning book, Surrounded by Geniuses, or his new book, The Wisdom of Ignorance, you know Alan has a remarkable ability to turn big concepts into practical lessons for everyday life. In this episode, we talk about why curiosity is more important than certainty and why embracing what you don't know may actually be your superpower. Whether you're a student planning your future, a parent supporting someone on their journey, or a leader navigating uncertainty, Alan's insights will give you a fresh lens on what's possible. Now, let's get some ScholarScoop from Alan. I was thinking about this a little bit, knowing that we were going to get to have this conversation. And I don't remember the exact year, but it was probably like 2012 or maybe a little before after that. But I think we met initially around a book that you had done called Surrounded by Geniuses. Does that book sound familiar? Am I on target?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's one of the 4 books I've written, so I hope I know it.
Well, I was thinking about it because, being so engaged with high achievers and running an honor society, I always feel like I'm always surrounded by incredibly talented people who I would probably qualify as geniuses in so many ways. I just remember you talking about this at a meeting, and there was this sense about it that like everybody has this genius within themselves or something. Is that kind of, when you think about surrounded by geniuses, what does that mean to you and maybe to this audience when they think about themselves and planning a future ahead?
Well, no, I think that's a great question. And so I think that everybody actually has the potential to be a genius. And so we have to take the right steps and learn the right skills, I think, to really unlock our own brilliance. But I like to think about that genius is kind of everywhere. And we can unlock our own genius by just being open to a world of ideas and a world of possibilities. And as I think about students, for sure, either students who are currently in school or students who've just finished school, just graduated, and have entered the world of work, I'd love them to think about the simple idea. When I wrote that book, I thought about an idea which I continue to think about called the 99% rule. And the 99% rule is a simple notion that 99% of all new ideas are based on someone else's thinking or something that somebody finds in nature. Some people who are listening probably have a raincoat or something that has Velcro in it. Velcro wasn't discovered by a person in a lab. It was discovered by a guy walking his dog through the mountains, and his dog got covered with burrs. But so the 99% rule is really important because the 99% rule suggests there are lots of ideas out there. And so I like students to think about the most important thing I believe you can do in university is to be excited about ideas, to be kind of excited about as many ideas as possible. And then the most exciting thing and important thing you can do when you get out of school is be somebody who can connect dots. I really feel like in the world of employment, they're less focused on whether my degree is in economics or civil engineering, or I actually have a degree in geography, but they're more focused on what can you do when you get here, and can you be the person who helps us look at this world filled with genius and use your genius to connect the dots.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think it's important for students, especially, to think about that when they're starting to go down the path of thinking about college or what do I want to major in? And I do know that there's a lot more people these days saying that, don't altogether put all your eggs in the what are you going to major in. Think about like getting a degree because you don't know how you're going to use that degree once you get out anyway. And that's because the world's changing a lot, right? And I know you've kind of addressed this in a lot of ways, but when you think about how there's now like, telecommuting and remote work and people tackling all kinds of ways to get their work done. Um, it's sort of like, how deep do you need to go, right? Like, do you dive deep into something or do you just scratch the surface or something? I think you have some perspective on that, right?
Well, yeah, so I would like people to think about actually that for the most part, we don't need to dive deep into too many things while we're students. We just need to be skillful at being able to quickly dive deep into something when a challenge or an opportunity presents itself. I love the whole idea that students think of themselves as kind of the entrepreneurs of their education and then be entrepreneurial in the workforce. And what I mean by that is expose yourself to a lot of things. Be somebody, I think, who has more kind of breadth than depth. I mean, let's be honest. The world, as you said, the world is changing super fast. And the likelihood that we start with a major in our first or second year and keep learning stuff, and that all the stuff we learned then 3 years after that is super relevant is really small, especially in technology fields that are changing really fast. I have so many people that I work with who majored in computer science or IT in college. And the reality is, they get out of college, they need to get certificates that show that they're up to date in the latest skills. So, my view is just be excited about learning and be able to find information quickly, be able to be passionate about ideas, but then realize that once you get out there, your greatest selling point is going to be your ability to think. Your ability to think and connect dots, that's what employers are going to want. Who's quick on their feet, who seizes opportunities, who helps us to be better today, and then helps us to be better tomorrow.
Now, that's really insightful thinking that I think can go a long way to helping sort out and figure some things out. I know you've also talked about like the six essential skills that are kind of important for everyone to think about. And so I think for our audience, like, what are those six essential skills and how are they kind of really aligned and relatable to what people
Oh,
are trying
great.
to figure
Yeah,
out?
no, and they really apply, I think, absolutely to our time in university. In fact, I can honestly say our son, who's our youngest, is still finishing his undergraduate degree. He's a scholarly guy, but he's taken a while to do
Some
it.
people do that. It's okay. It's
It's all okay. And and our 2 daughters are in the world of work, and so I feel like these apply, and so here's what I want people to think about, and if people want more information, these ideas are detailed in my newest book, which is coming out now, called The Wisdom of Ignorance, but it's what I call a formula for enlightened ignorance, and so I actually suggest to people, it's often better not to know a lot about something if we have these following 6 skills, and the first is simple, and that is whatever you do, find a purpose that matters to you.
Hmm.
And if you're in college, find a major or something you want to study because you see the value or the purpose or your ability to use that to make a difference in the world. That's the first thing. Now you're in the world of work, find a company or an organization whose purpose, what they're trying to accomplish, really resonates with you. It turns out we learn things faster, we learn things more deeply, we are more creative and innovative when we're purposeful. So,
Mhm.
a few moments ago, I said learn a lot, be excited about ideas, but land on something that really matters to you where you feel like you want to make a difference. That's the first. The second is be curious. Okay. And so I'm figuring a lot of people who are listening to this podcast absolutely understand the value of being curious. But when I say curious, I would like people to cast a wider net in their search for ideas and inspiration. So let's say we find a purpose that matters to us. Let's say we want to create a new product that's valuable or try to end homelessness or whatever the case is. Then I want you to be curious and say to yourself, let's look around a big world at ideas and inspirations that could spark our best thinking. And so curiosity isn't something that simply says, I'll get another book or read another article. It says, let me get out there and see who's thinking about things that could make me smarter about this. The third thing is we all have to be humble, and that's pretty easy. It's even easy for me, and
Uh-huh.
I've been in my career a long time, and I haven't been at college or university for a while. Um, and one might say, because I've had lots of jobs and I've run our business for a while, that I know a fair amount, but the more I know, the more I realize I don't know a lot.
Yeah.
And so the cool thing about humility is the simple notion that it's actually okay to say, I don't know. And I
Mhm.
think when people are looking for a job, if somebody asks you, can you do this? You can say, I don't know, but I'm excited to learn how to figure it out. And I'm absolutely going to figure out really fast. So humility should drive us to say, I can figure that out. I can do it, but I don't know it right now. And that's okay. Because as we just talked about, the world is changing fast. And
Mhm.
so the reality is, I might learn something in college. I get a first job. The world is very different. I should be honest and say, well, I studied economics in college, but there's some new ideas now. I'm eager, or I studied accounting, or I studied whatever I studied. I'm eager now to try and figure out what's the best, what's the state of the art in what you're trying to do. I'm going to make that happen. So that's the third thing. The fourth is the notion of respect, and that is that I should respect any other person on the planet because I can learn something from them. The book I wrote before The Wisdom of Ignorance is called The Necessity of Strangers, and it's a simple idea that I should connect with a lot of strangers. And when I go to college, most people are strangers, the folks in my
Right.
dorm, the folks in my classes. I have built an ability to connect with new people. Don't stop that when you leave college and get into the world of work. You certainly want to connect with the people in your organization, but you want to connect with lots of other people. They're going to have other perspectives, other ideas. They might suggest things that you could be doing. They might be the source of your next job. So connect with people and respect everybody. Now, you might pass judgment on somebody, say, "Ah, why do I need to connect with them?" Or, gee, they don't do anything that valuable. Everybody knows something that would benefit us. We need to do that. The fifth thing is I want people to be what I call future focused. And by future focused, that is, we live today in the present, but the future's happening all around us. And so we need to pay attention to the tea leaves. Some of the folks who are listening may have majored in literature. And so I'd
Mhm.
like them to go back to a guy named Jules Verne. He's kind of,
Okay.
some people think he's like the father of, he's one of the original founders of science fiction. In the mid 1800s, he wrote about ideas that included spaceships, submarines, even an early form of the internet in like 80 different books. Jules Verne was a keen observer. He walked down the streets of Paris trying to figure out where the world was going. We have a lot more tools at our disposal, but I want people to be future focused, and that is, don't just sit at your dining room table working remotely or sit in an office. Get up and wander around and say to yourself, what's remarkable out here? What's going on that's different? If you see a Waymo car, don't just say, oh, it's a driverless car. See, that's kind of awesome, but there's a lot to that. If
Mhm.
you realize that you're using Apple Pay, and my guess is a lot of people listening are kind of cashless today because we have our phone or things like that. Say to
Yep.
yourself, what does that tell me about where the world is going and how transactions are going? So be focused on the fact that the future is changing before our eyes, and we're going to have to find a place there. So we need to pay attention. And the last thing I want people to think about is the idea of being paranoid. And so, and so people go, paranoid, that's not a good thing. Paranoia is a great thing. And what I mean by this is, and paranoia is the driver for continued scholarship, I would say. And here's
Mhm.
why. The world is changing fast. There are people and technologies that could take our place if we don't continue to up our game. So we always need to be turning around and looking and saying, who's following us? Is it another person with different skills? Is it AI more capable than it's ever been before? That paranoia should force us to regularly learn new things, consistently be scholars, and always up our game, I think. Okay,
Wow.
that was too
That was
much,
a
sorry.
No, that wasn't too much. That was so much. That was so many good
Okay,
points. And when you were talking, like so many things were going through my head that I think is very much worth exploring a little bit further. And I'm
okay,
curious about this on the curiosity point.
okay.
I think And this is a little bit related to the pandemic generation. There's a lot of fear and anxiety about stepping out to try something that they've never done before. And we're working really hard because we hear consistently from students that they're like, I don't know how to do that, or I can't actually step up to be a leader because I've never led anything before. And I think your curiosity point is something that we haven't said that word directly, but it's something that we keep saying over and over is like you have to do it to get the experience. So here's your chance. Like, say yes to the opportunity. I don't know if you've noticed that or not, or if you've seen any of these kind of skills that might have been a little bit readjusted because of some of the experiences that people endured, maybe without they weren't looking to be a part of a pandemic, but now they've got to figure out how to get to the other side of some of the residual aspects. So has that come up at all? I'm just
It comes up
curious.
all the time, and my sense of it is that we have a generation or a part of a generation that got used to, not that they wanted to, and then somewhat comfortable with being remote or not
Mhm.
connecting with other people.
Yep.
And the reality is, in order, I believe, to be a leader and to build your capabilities to do that, you got to connect with more people. Some of it you can do virtually, but some of it ought to be face to face. And so
Mhm.
I really want people to get out and engage with people. I want them to engage with strangers. I want them to engage with AI as a starting point for thinking differently. So if you're listening and you're worried about your ability to lead or you're worried about imposter syndrome, you can go on ChatGPT and just write a query, and that query can say, tell me what I need to do to really engage other people and be a good leader. That's not the be all and end all, but it gives you a starting point and it'll
Mhm.
give you confidence that those are skills you're capable of having. But everything is about practice, right?
Yep.
If I've never led before, I need to take initiative. If I'm at school, take initiative within your chapter or find a project at school where you can be part of a team taking the lead. You want to build up your capability, and then leadership becomes kind of a behavior. You see the things that you're doing well, you see the things you're not doing well, but keep doing that. Take initiative, make something happen. If you're at work and you've just started a job, look around your organization and say to yourself, what could be better here? And
Mhm.
by saying that, then say to the bosses, whoever your boss is, this is something I think could be better. I'd be willing to pull together a team of people to try and wrestle this to the ground, to try. So create opportunities that are non threatening opportunities for you to take a leadership role so that when you're placed in a leadership role, you feel more confident about your ability. I like to say, we're all kind of imposters, but that's the way a fast moving world challenges us. We're all imposters because the reality is none of us can keep up. And so we have to then say to ourselves, let's figure out just in time what I need to know, and then let me take initiative to lead and make that happen.
Yeah, that's a lot of really good food for thinking about how this works. And it's something that I think needs to be iterated and over iterated. And I think on a similar line of thinking, and because you mentioned that you're the current parent of a college student and you've had other college students in your life, um, I think there's some similar things that need to be addressed with parents these days of college students who oftentimes I think limit some of the curiosity or exploration because they have their own expectations for what they think their students should be doing. And I'm just thinking about this from what you've done and working with so many different types of people. I think there's two sides to it. Like, what can the student potentially do to help the parent, to help them with their parents and thinking about, I want to be curious, I want to figure out my own thing. Or the parents even to say, I'm going to trust that you're a human that can figure some things out for yourself.
Yeah.
That's something we see more than I can honestly believe sometimes
Oh,
on
and
the
I see it in our group of friends. I see it in our kids' friends' parents. And so I believe there are a couple types. Well, there's always a continuum, but I believe there are a couple types of parents. There are parents who have very clear expectations, and often those expectations are, this is a career that we value, and this is a career that makes a fair amount of money, so you ought to do that. I don't want to alienate parents, and I don't want to cause any of the people listening to get in trouble with their parents. But the reality is, as I've told all of our kids, I'm not going to be around forever, you know? And so you have to find something that matters to you. Now let's peel this back. A lot of times kids arrive at school, um, and they hear the idea, find your passion here. Um, it's okay, but that's not what I tell our kids. I tell our kids, find a purpose in the world that matters to you, something that you'd like to make a difference in, that you believe you can contribute to, and learn and invest in that. And hopefully you're going to be able to make a living doing that. And then channel all of your curiosity to being remarkable at that. I got to believe, even if I start doing something as a student that my parents would like me not to have done, maybe they want me to be a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever,
Mhm.
CPA, whatever.
Yep.
Um, I gotta believe when they start to see how invested I am, how committed I am to a purpose that really matters, that peels back some of their kind of stress about what I'm doing. And they suddenly see, isn't that what we want for our kids, to make a difference in the world and do something that matters? So I don't wanna alienate parents. I don't want kids to get in battles with their parents. I don't want them to say, "I heard this guy on a podcast, and he said I should do what matters to me." But ultimately, we need to land in a place we're happy. How many people go to law school and then start to work as a lawyer and decide, "I really didn't like being a lawyer," and then they go and end up running a nonprofit organization or a small firm or something like that? Try and figure out in your college years what purpose really kind of gets you excited every day, and then start on a journey to make a difference in that.
Yeah, I think we probably are gonna have a lot of folks that listen to this are like, "Can I have you for my parent? Would you mind would you be willing to take me on? Or can I have a clip of this that I'll forward subtly to my parents and maybe they'll take something away?" It does need to evolve, I think, where there's this sense of, finding the purpose and the thing that you love needs to be much more emphasized. There's a lot of people that do have that passion mentality, like, find your passion and just go for that. But even we talked about this on other, ScholarScoop conversations where um, even to find your passion or your purpose, you do have to do all the things that you're saying. You have to step out and do some things before you can even potentially realize that you are passionate about it or you find that to be a purpose that really aligns. So you got to go out there and meet the people. And I was to say this really quick too. When I was thinking about your essential skills, there's so many people that they'll look at it and they're like, college was such an easy place to engage or to meet people because you're forced to in so many ways. You get out of college and now you're kind of on your own and you might feel isolated. And you do have to take so much more initiative out of college to meet people than you may have to when you're in school. And I think you need to prepare for that. You need to think about what you're learning in college outside of the classroom that's going to give you some of the capabilities to go and find your groups of people, similar interested people, and all that stuff once you're out of school. So when you mentioned that point, I kept thinking about all the people I've known that are like, it was so easy to meet people in college and it's so hard now that I'm
Oh,
out.
you're exactly right. No, and you've mentioned a bunch of things that are really important for people to think about. So certainly it's going to take more effort, but that effort could be fun. And just like college is now a collection of hundreds or thousands of people who share an interest, and that was to go to college, you'll find people who share interests with you. You'll find places to go where it will be more natural for you to connect with people. But the other thing I want people to think about is the idea that I don't need to find my purpose today or tomorrow or even in my first job. I think at times it's a bit of an iterative process. I find out through jobs this isn't what I want to do, or this isn't the way I can make a difference. And then I find the next job or the next opportunity, or then I do some work in my community or my church or synagogue or civic organization. And I suddenly say that really resonates with me. Or I work at a food pantry, or I come up with an idea and turn it into a business. You don't have to have a clear purpose. In fact, it would be amazing if you had a clear purpose when you graduated from
Yeah.
college. And so just be open to the fact that once you find something that really excites you to get up, you're not only going to be engaged with what you're doing, you're actually going to meet more people because suddenly now I say, who are the people I ought to know to move this idea forward? And then I reach out to people.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I think will go a long way if everybody thinks about that more purposefully. So that's really great. I want to talk a second, and I don't we don't have to go too deep into this, but I know the last time we had a catch up call, you were kind of updating me on your health and like how you kind of got thrown a big curveball when you had, I think, a pretty rare type of stroke. So like, how did that change you when you had to go through an unanticipated crisis like that, and what'd you learn from that?
Well, um, just to fill in if people are listening, so 4.5 years ago, I had this really rare stroke. I was having dinner with my wife and our three kids, who are now 25, 28, and 32. And suddenly I lost the ability to speak. I thought I was having a conversation and they said they couldn't hear me. And then I started to try and speak again. Um, and I couldn't make a sound they could hear, and then I lost the ability to see them. I had 18 months of therapy to relearn how to see and speak. And
Mm.
given that I write books and speak around the world about my ideas, that was really a bummer. Um, I
To
spent
say
my
the least.
I spent my time while I couldn't see or speak. I was getting a lot of therapy, but I spent my time sitting in a rocking chair on our porch, listening to books on tape, trying to keep my mind going, and listening to an eclectic set of things just to spark my best thinking, because I believed at some point I would see and speak and resume my life as I knew it. What it taught me, of course, and I think it's a lesson for all of us, and I hope nobody has to go through a stroke to learn this lesson, is the world is an uncertain place. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And so we just need to position ourselves to be as flexible and versatile and curious and creative as possible, because we might have to change on a dime. The skills we've developed might not be right. The organization we work for might have a budget cut. Think of all the people who are working in international development, and then all the budgets were cut and they lost their jobs. Lots of things can happen. And so we just have to, I think, approach each day being grateful and then also realizing there's always a bit of uncertainty. I can't control everything. What I can control is I keep moving forward and I keep learning.
Well, I'm glad that you made it to the other side of that, obviously, but I really do admire your attitude, and I think it's so easy I mean, I would have imagined going through that, there probably were times that you were just really down and out about the whole experience. So trying to remain focused on the positive aspects and what you could still do while you're recovering, I think is something that, it's always worth thinking about. So I'm glad that you were able to get back to being able to have conversations and travel around the world doing the work that you do. And then to especially been able to come to the other side and have now your book that is, I think by the time this hits it into the reality of podcast world, it will be released and ready for consumption. So let's talk about for just a couple minutes. Like, first of all, you highlighted this a second ago. I was going to mention the necessity of strangers because I just really love that concept in that book. And you hit the point that I really wanted to say. Like, when you go to college, it's just a bunch of strangers. So there's your opportunity. So I don't want to miss a moment to say that that is really also, I think, a really good resource for people who are in college or maybe coming out of high school thinking about college or out into the world. But I think your new book, um, it's so interesting and intriguing the way that you observe and the way that you connect dots. And I think there's so much magic to it and just the way that everything does work. So when I think about the wisdom of ignorance, it kind of seems counterintuitive when we think about, like, for my audience, oftentimes we're high achievers and they want to be wise and not ignorant at all. I don't think it's always like ignorance can be perceived as something that, well, I don't want to be ignorant. I want to be smart and capable and wise. But you've done a book about how that ignorance can actually be your superpower in a lot of
Oh,
ways.
absolutely. Yeah.
So just
So,
give us the lowdown on that.
yeah, no, and let me show the book cover because I'd love people to get it. But think about this. And This might particularly resonate, I hope, with students who are in a technical field, but it should resonate with students in any field. Um, the reality is that progress is based on solving problems we don't know the answer to now. And the entire history of human history, the entire history of science, the entire history of engineering was that we found things we hadn't figured out and we figured out how to do them. So, in that sense, I don't believe it's a foreign idea. But what I do understand is the following: if I know something really well, I can tweak it and make it better. If
Mhm.
I don't know anything about something, I have the chance to create a breakthrough because I approach it with open eyes and like a fresh perspective. I simply don't know. I'm guessing everyone listening to this uses Uber, okay? They either use Uber to get a ride or they use Uber to get food, Uber Eats. Uber wasn't started by people who knew a lot about taxis. In fact, the two guys that started Uber knew nothing about taxis. What they knew was they couldn't find a taxi when they were in Paris, France. And
Right.
so they suddenly said to themselves, and remember at the beginning, we talked about this 99% rule. There are all these ideas out there. They suddenly said, there's this thing out there called GPS or GIS technology. And so they said, what if we could use that technology to take a person who had a car and bring them together with a person who needed a ride? Wouldn't that revolutionize? No one would have to stand on a corner hoping that a taxi cab came. So the reality is that we just need to have fresh eyes to see new challenges. And so that's what I want people to think about. That's the whole idea of the wisdom of ignorance is if I can look at something with fresh eyes, that is a superpower. Let's be honest. The world is filled with problems and opportunities we haven't solved yet. Um, and we haven't solved it with all the stuff we know. So, shouldn't we try and solve it with what we don't know?
I think that's like something that really will go a long way for stepping into something with big, wide eyes and no conception of things can go a long way. It's funny you mentioned the Uber thing. I remember, I feel like this might have been at a South by Southwest or something, but I ended up in a small room with the guy Travis, who was one
Right.
of the founders
One
of
of the
Uber.
founders, right?
It was just getting started. And honestly, he was talking about it just the same way you were. We had this like realization that this thing could really help people. And in the beginning, it was only black cars, right? Like
Right.
only like car service type. And they were giving out like a code where you would text a code to some place. And this is also the thing that's so real about how technology works. You fast forward to now and it's so elaborate and everything. This was like not. I mean, it was like we got a code. I would send the code with my address and wait, and then a black car would pull up to
Right.
take me away, right? And I just remember telling that to friends. It's like, you should use this code. And they're like, you're going to get in a car with a random person. And there's all the skeptics, but people that really make breakthroughs have to learn how to drown out the noise of all the people that are going to tell you all the reasons it won't work or all the reasons that that's a crazy bad idea, in order for things to become incredibly successful. And I think that's a really good example of one.
Well, no, I think you're exactly right. And then what I'd love to build on that you've said that underlying it is vitally important for everybody listening is creating a breakthrough, having impact, navigating our career is an iterative process. And so the folks at Uber didn't start out knowing everything. Things evolve. We only have to demonstrate that we have a good idea and have done
Mhm.
enough thinking to get people to believe this is valuable. And then we work with them to figure out how to make it better and refine it. And so I feel that's liberating too, is I don't need to know everything to solve a problem. I just need to know enough or quickly figure out enough to actually launch it in the world, see if it gets some traction, or launch it in my company or organization, see if it gets some traction, or launch it on campus, see if it gets traction, and then commit with other people to making it better. And so that's kind of cool.
That's very cool. And I know we're running totally out of time here, which I would love to keep talking to you for forever because I think you always have so many great ideas. But I did want to just say thank you so much for always being such a good connector and always staying in touch and and the ways that you've helped some of my projects by stepping in. I know at one point with an organization that I'm a part of. I think the thing that I admire, there's a lot of amazing things to admire about you, but what I really do appreciate about you is all the things that you talk about and say, you live those things. I see you doing those things. And I think sometimes that doesn't play out to be what really happens with people. So thank you for what you have done and created, and the books that you've actually taken the time to write to help people in so many ways. And I know that your newest book's going to be a huge success, and I really want to encourage everyone to pick that up along with the others, because I think there's so much about them that will help you become a better version of yourself and learn things about yourself that you might not have thought about just from your concepts and perspectives. So
Well,
thank you so much, Alan.
you're overly kind, but I appreciate it. And anyone who listens to this and would like to connect with me, I'd be delighted to connect with you. If I've said anything that you'd like to talk a bit more about, please reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn, connect with me through my website, alangregerman.com, whatever way you're comfortable doing it. Um, I'm not a hard person to talk with, so if you're nervous about connecting with strangers, I guarantee you I'll respond. But thanks for having me on. I always love talking with you.
Thanks, Alan. And you're definitely the stranger that everyone should make sure that you're not a stranger for very long. So thanks for squeezing this into your day and for all the ways that I'm sure you'll help some people through this. So
My
look forward to
pleasure.
the next time.
Thanks.
Thank you.